Hey, Sarah at Red Dog Studio here. I'm putting together some Opulent Monsters Magnum Opus all-in-one diapers, and I thought I'd do a really quick video of sewing the inset onto the PUL guard. This is for the inner of the diaper. So I'm going to start by showing how I pin it, just so people can get a visual of what it looks like. So I have the inset here. I've got my two flaps sewn on, one on each end. I happen to be using a topper material here for this one. This is the absorbent layer, and this is the athletic wicking jersey that I like to use. So you're going to mark it. There are notches on the pattern. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 marks that you have on the inset, and then you're going to go ahead, lay this face up, and then you're going to lay your PUL guard face up, making sure that you have the large end of your PUL guard aligned with the large end of your inset panel. Believe it or not, I actually sewed one the opposite way. I do not even know how I managed to do that, but it sure did look funny when I was done. So what I like to do is I only pin at each of these notches as I sew to sell, so it goes much quicker this way for me. And you'll see why actually it might be a little bit easier once you get it on the machine. So again, I'm just gonna line up the notches on the PUL guard with the notches on the inset, and there's 8 of them. So I lay everything face up, and then I go ahead and I flip them over and then line up the marks. And I use these clips at either edge, but I really like to use pins on this, and I normally try to sew without pins as much as I possibly can, but I leave the pins in as I sew. It's a little bit easier that way for this particular project. So again, going along and marking all the notches. And I did want to point one thing out, because there was somebody in the group that had this question within the last couple days. It looks like there's way more inset material than you have PUL for. You'll see when I get it on the machine that once you ease all of these curves in, it lays nice and flat and it works out brilliantly. So I have my sewing machine set up to baste the inset into the PUL guard. My stitch length is 5, which is the longest stitch length my machine does. And I also have a sort of a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance set up. The serge seam allowance on this is 1/4 inch, and I sort of like to go inside of that so that you don't see my basting stitch as I serge or after I've serged. The other tool I like to use is an owl. Sort of use this trick when I started to do person bag making, and it's really helpful as you go around the corners. You can kind of use it to hold everything down. Use it as sort of a third hand as you manipulate the PUL. I'm just going to go around and sew, and I'll probably speed things up a little bit. The other thing I'm going to show you is when I was talking about how it seems like there's way more inset material than there is PUL material. So you'll see me ease the curves in, and everything will come out beautifully. And for those that sell, don't forget your compliance tag, which I just sort of hop in underneath that. So here I am at the first pin, and what I like to do, so again, you can sort of see how it looks like there's way more material down here than you have PUL for. So I start down here at the second pin, and I lay everything as flat as I can, and I just take my fingers and I ease the curve of the inset into the curve of the PUL while it's on the bed of my machine here. See that? So again, everything is easing into the curve here. So I hold on my fingers back here, make sure all my raw edges are lined up with my 3 layers that I have. And don't tell my grandmother, but I leave the pins in when I sew. And just keep easing everything in. And now I just go pin to pin, and I'll do the same for this third pin here, easing everything in while it's flat on my machine. So at these corners, again, I'm easing everything from the pin up. It's really tricky at these corners. I'm not gonna lie. Takes a bit of practice, but you just sort of, you know, it's really nice having a knee lift, so I can kind of lift the presser foot as I push these layers of fabric out of the way. And here I come into the curve. See, I'm using my owl. So go ahead and admire your work, take your pins out. So go along the perimeter, look for any sort of puckers or wrinkles. Go ahead and unpick it before you serge it on. This is why we basted. So just check everything. The other thing you want to make sure is that you've got all 3 layers in your seam. Your absorbent layer, your topping layer if you're using it, and your PUL. And you're set to complete the diaper.